Welcome back to Lost Codex Legends. My name is Jesse, and today we're talking about Thrall once again for his entire storyline throughout the Cataclysm. Now, you might say, Jesse, we've covered several expansions and several games over the last two. We're only doing one? Well, he did a lot in the Cataclysm, specifically in some books. So today we're going to dive right into Thrall, Thrall's storyline as the world shaman in the Cataclysm. And with that, let's just dive right in. Let's just talk about Thrall right away. Here we go. Now, Thrall has stepped down as war chief. He now wears some very simple shaman robes and some really big beads and a hood. No longer wears the doom plate. Carries the doom hammer, but no longer wears the doom plate. And as the storyline plays out, it's revealed that Thrall is actually captured by SI-7 agents on his way to the Maelstrom. The dude's trying to go save the world, and the SI-7 just get in his way. And the goblins, specifically the Bilgewater Cartel goblins, have recently just fled from Kazan. The fleets are controlled by Galliwix. The player is a prisoner on board Galliwix's fleet, and they play an active role in rescuing Thrall. Now, in gratitude, Thrall helps the player goblins and the survivors in their battles across the Lost Isles. And towards the end of the storyline, Thrall physically fights Trade Prince Galliwix, beats him, and then proclaims that the cartel will join the Horde. Other goblin cartels have always been neutral, but specifically the Bilgewater, specifically because the Alliance fleet opened fire on the Bilgewater, there's now some faction animosity there. Thrall declares that they will join the Horde, and for some reason lets Galliwix stay in charge. He lets Galliwix stay in charge of the Bilgewater, and it's a great decision move. It's really, Thrall, God, what is with your ability to choose leaders? Either way, the goblins join the Horde, and they're sent to speak with Garrosh Hellscream. As tensions within the Horde begin to rise, notably between Vol'jin and Garrosh, Thrall steps back into the picture very briefly during the Troll Starting Zone questline, where he appears as an image. He's talking to Vol'jin. Thrall reaffirms his decision to promote Garrosh to War Chief and says that the Horde needs a hero's name. They need a hero of the world, one that won't buckle or kneel before the Alliance, but one that'll bring pride to the Horde. And he reaffirms his decision to Vol'jin right then and there. And Vol'jin says, "All right, I won't bother you anymore. You have a world to go save. Go do your thing." Now, at this point in time, Thrall, as one of the most powerful shamans on Azeroth, Thrall has now stepped away from his duties as War Chief to join the Earthen Ring. And once he's at the Maelstrom, once he gets past the SI-7 and his little detour, this is where Deathwing made his return to Azeroth. The Corrupted Aspect's entry has shattered the barriers between Azeroth and the Elemental Planes, and Thrall lends his powers to stabilize the rift. There is some nasty energy coming out of the Maelstrom itself, and Thrall can be found there at the Maelstrom doing his shaman thing. Now, aside from his brief appearances at the Maelstrom and in the Goblin questline and in this Troll Starting Zone, Thrall's not really seen much in the early moments of Cataclysm, but that doesn't mean he's not doing anything. This next bit in his storyline is one hell of a roller coaster, and you may be unaware of this part if you haven't read Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects, a book written by Christie Golden. This storyline features basically Thrall after he's arrived at the Maelstrom, but before the Rage of the Firelands stuff, before the Dragon Soul stuff at the end. So basically what happens is Thrall is struggling as a shaman, and Augur says that his connection to the elements has been fickle because he longs for the Horde. His mind, his soul is somewhere else. It's not easy just to step away from the Horde, especially since the Horde that he stepped away with is the Horde that he built. It's not just a random Horde, that is his Horde, and he's not entirely comfortable fully stepping away. Which, of course, Thrall denies. He's stubborn and says he has to leave to clear his head. At this time, there's unrest growing amongst the dragons after the Twilight cultists have attacked Wormrest Temple. Alexstrasza's consort Crassus has seemingly betrayed the Wormrest Accord and destroyed the sanctum underneath the temple, along with all the eggs found there. Alexstrasza is distraught, everyone's up in arms, and Alexstrasza flat out just disbands the Accord altogether. Of course, all of this is witnessed by Ysera, who then seeks out Thrall and convinces him to undertake a journey to a Kaldorei village in Feralas for a minor problem involving an elemental, specifically a fire elemental. And Thrall's a little bit confused. He says, why me? There are literally thousands of shamans. Why do you have to talk to the guy who's supposed to be at the Maelstrom right now? But fine, I'll go do it, I guess. He's pretty hesitant to do it. He goes there and he manages to convince the elemental to screw off, go do something else. He's reminded of the fire elementals that attacked Orgrimmar during the rampant pre-shattering, pre-cataclysm bit. But he convinces the fire elemental to go do whatever it is fire elementals do. Get mad at things, I guess. And he has a nice evening chatting and eating and feasting with the night elves there. A night elf in this village, who's actually a green dragon named Desharin, approaches him and says, we gotta go to the Caverns of Time. Ysera has a much more important task for you. Once they're at the Caverns of Time, they're ambushed by a cloaked stranger who attacks them and flat out just kills Desharin. Thrall recognizes this stranger somehow. He's a hooded, cloaked stranger, so we can't see his identity, but there's something about him. There's something that he feels is oddly familiar. And as the assassin is using time magic and time portals to get the jump on Thrall, bronze dragons show up to take over for the fight. And when Thrall starts to lose, they tell Thrall to flee, just abandon this fight, jump through a time portal, go. And so he does, and he arrives in this alternate universe that's roughly scheduled around the time of the Second War. Now when he's here, he begins to think, okay, I am in a Second War alternate universe. There's some things I can do. Meeting with Doomhammer is the first thing that comes to mind. But he realizes, I can't do that. That's going to change the timeline. He's actually mistaken, because of his green skin, as an orc warlock by an orcish patrol party, and he's taken to a neighboring base camp. To Thrall's astonishment, he catches a glimpse of not only Doomhammer, but Mum and Dad. Draka and Durotan are there. And to an even bigger surprise, Draka is holding a baby version of him. Draka actually approaches him with a tiny little Thrall in her arms, and there's a very brief conversation, but Thrall is mostly just at a loss for words. This is the first time he's seeing Mum and Dad in the flesh, and you can imagine how emotional that is for Thrall, hearing these legends and stories about how great Draka and Durotan of the Frostwolves were, and their terrible, terrible end, and how they lost their lives, and how he was the sole survivor in that attack. And you can imagine everything going on in Thrall's head, and he can't say a single word. It's moments after this that he realizes that this is the moment where, when Draka and Durotan are leaving camp, they are going to go off with the guards of Orgrim Doomhammer, who are actually loyal to the Shadow Council. This is mere moments before they're going to die. For a second, Thrall believes he can save them. He can save Mum and Dad. He can prevent it all from happening. And then he realizes he can't. This, again, he thought about talking to Doomhammer earlier, and he said, no, I can't do that. This is definitely something that he can't do, because this will mess up the timeline entirely. And Thrall is forced to watch Mum and Dad absolutely get murdered, massacred here. This is the moment where he loses his parents, and he has to absolutely exercise full restraint. He ends up joining the fray, but when it comes time where there's only one single assassin left, Thrall basically has to hold all of the restraint within him to let that assassin go. That assassin has to escape for the sake of the timeline, and Thrall cannot change that. Thrall cannot exact revenge. Thrall cannot change anything. What he can do is, in these final moments, as he's absolutely heartbroken, he approaches the body of his dying father, of dying Durotan, and he swears to a dying Durotan that his child will live, that their people will be redeemed, and that the orcs of all kinds will have a new place to call home. And there's someone who would change that. As the cloaked assassin from the Caverns of Time, he shows up to ruin the scene. Thrall doesn't get a break here. And attacks Thrall flat out amongst the gory, bloodied mess of the assassination site. The assassin says to Thrall that it will be much easier to kill Thrall when Thrall is a baby, rather than Thrall fully grown. And this is roughly when Blackmore, the human who raised Thrall, is approaching the site, him and his hunting party. And so Thrall grabs the attacker, grabs this hooded, cloaked figure, and tackles him into a river where they fight, just as Blackmore approaches the site of the dead orcs and finds the screaming baby Thrall, just as the timeline is supposed to happen. In the river, Thrall and this attacker are just going at it and fighting, and there's a glimmer of bronze scales. And once again, Thrall is transported to another dimension, to another moment in time. Thrall is transported to another moment in time, to another moment in the timeline, and his attacker is nowhere to be seen. Thrall does, however, find himself face to face with a fully grown Taretha Foxton, who's not the cheery Taretha Foxton he remembers. She's a little bit embittered to what seems to be a harsh life. After a little while, Thrall is able to convince her that it is in fact him, Thrall, showing an identical necklace to her. And she reveals to Thrall that Thrall actually died in this timeline when he was a child. It seems that Blackmore sobered up after he realized he was robbed of his child gladiator prize, and did the unexpected. Rather than fall into a pit of despair and depression and let alcohol consume him, as he did in the real timeline, he actually conscripted mercenaries into his new army and trained them himself. He gathered huge support, and Blackmore led his army against Orgrim Doomhammer and actually slew the Orc warchief in combat. Rather than having the completely bewildered orcs killed, Blackmore engages them in a secret pact. They join his army, creates one massive army, and together they march on Lordaeron, completely usurp the entire house of Menethil. Taranis is killed, Uther is killed, Anduin Lothar is killed, Arthas is forced to flee to Stormwind, and Aedalus Blackmore crowns himself king in this alternate, weird, messed up universe. Now, Thrall realizes that the timeline is way more messed up than it should be, and the only person who can help fix this would be a dragon. Now, luckily, Thrall knows that at this point in history, there's one dragon who's fairly close by, and that's Crassus in Dalaran. Now, this alternate universe Crassus is an archmage in Dalaran, and basically Thrall lucks out. If Crassus wasn't there, or if alternate universe Crassus was killed, who knows how the storyline would have happened. Luckily, Crassus was there. Thrall and Taretha travel to Dalaran to meet with Crassus, or Corielstraz is his dragon name, and after they convince Corielstraz to help them, there's a really confusing moment. This is where things get really meta for the time travel part.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
They realize that this timeway, the entire timeline they're in, is completely false. And they also realize that in this moment, time is an illusion here. And by realizing that this timeline is fake, that this timeline is false, it suddenly allows Thrall, and presumably Corielstraz, to see time itself. And what's interesting is, even though Corielstraz is not a bronze dragon, he's still able to help Thrall realize that his perception of time is illusionary. Allowing Thrall to step out of the timeline physically, he's able to leave the timeline just simply by realizing that this timeline is fake. And this leads to Thrall finding Nozdormu. If you're confused, that's okay, because mortals are not supposed to fully understand the concepts of time. Basically, Thrall realizes that time is an illusion, that time is fake, and steps out of the timeline, where he finds Nozdormu, as I just mentioned. And here, the great bronze dragon has kept himself hidden away. Nozdormu reveals to Thrall and other bronze dragons that the reason he stepped away and retreated from the world was in order to discover the cause of a dire event that happens in the future in all timelines and to avert it. This event would be Nozdormu finding and presiding over the infinite dragonflight, so Nozdormu creates this corrupted alternate bronze dragonflight. Nozdormu also admits that he's the one responsible for sending this assassin after Thrall, and Thrall comes to realize the mysterious identity of the assassin when he was talking to Taretha in this alternate weird universe where King Blackmore presided after killing Orgrim Doomhammer and killing Taranis Menethil. King Blackmore was missing. No one had seen King Blackmore for a long time, and that's because King Blackmore had left the timeline to assassinate another timeline Thrall, the main timeline Thrall, This assassin who attacked him at the Caverns of Time and at the river near his dying father was King Attalus Blackmore from another timeline. From the timeline that he found Taretha in, from the same timeline that he talked to Crassus in, a timeline where Thrall dies as a child, and Attalus Blackmore rises to become the most dangerous Attalus Blackmore possible. Despite all this, Nozdormu actually thanks Thrall for giving him clarity and sends him on another task to find and hopefully lift Alexstrasza from her grief over Crassus's demise and betrayal, and to convince the Blue Dragonflight to set aside his differences with the others and to join forces against the impending darkness. Thrall seeks out Alexstrasza in Desolace, and it doesn't go well. Basically, Alexstrasza rebukes and denies Thrall any opportunity to help her get over her grief, and banishes him from Desolace. Despite this, Thrall does not give up hope on Alexstrasza, but realizes that he should go do the other thing Nozdormu asked him to do, and that is to help the Blue Dragons get over being angry at everyone and to help the other flights. When he arrives in the Nexus, after a very cold reception, no pun intended, because it's in Koldara, he is granted an audience with Arygos and Kalecgos, and he learns that the Blue Dragons are in the middle of an election. They're trying to decide who is going to be the new Blue Dragon aspect. Arygos, son of Malygos, or our buddy Kalecgos. Now, Arygos is a much more ferocious and hostile candidate between the two, and to Thrall's great relief, Kalecgos is chosen as the new aspect, and Arygos rage quits and leaves. As the flight begins to celebrate its new leader's ascension, Twilight dragons show up and ruin the party, as they like to do, and Thrall leaps upon Kalecgos' back, and the two prove a formidable fighting force together. This battle leads to the Wyrmrest Temple, where Thrall and Kalak catch sight of the semi-functional Chromatus, the massive five-headed dragon created by Nefarian, the last experiment by Nefarian before he was killed by the adventurers. He created this monster, but was killed before he could give it the spark of life. Although Chromatus is barely functional, he begins to gain power. It turns out Arygos never made it far and was murdered, and his blood was used to reanimate and empower Chromatus to his full form. Thrall is hurtled off of Kalecgos' back in the ensuing chaos and finds himself footing through the snow. As he calls upon the aid of the elements to help him in this moment, he's granted a very peculiar vision of Crassus's final moments and resolves to inform the Lifebinder of the truth behind his demise. Something is different from what he heard, and he needs Alexstrasza to see this. Thrall is brutally attacked by the newly arrived Blackmore, the alternate King Blackmore. Blackmore is thrown back by Thrall as the two fight. Thrall throws the elements at him, and there's this massive duel between the two, which ends with Blackmore begging Thrall for his life. He absolutely begs Thrall for his life, and although Thrall takes no pleasure in it, he brings the Doomhammer down upon Blackmore, crushing his skull utterly with the Doomhammer, and conquered that shadow that had been recast over Thrall's life in the last short little while. Elsewhere, as the Blue Dragons are beaten back by Chromatus, Kalecgos has Thrall rescued, and Thrall gives Kalecgos a little bit of a pep talk, saying, "Hey, you're the new leader, remain strong, all is well, you're doing great, buddy. I need to go talk to someone else." And so Thrall heads off for Desolace, just casually flies half across the world, to find Alexstrasza in an even more shattered state. He shares with her this vision he was granted, and in this solemn silence the two witness what actually happened with Crassus. Crassus did not betray the Wyrmrest Accord. His final heroic sacrifice was to protect Wyrmrest's unhatched children from being born as chromatic beasts. Reinvigorated and regaining her confidence, knowing that her consort was not a traitor and did not murder these children, but instead gave his life to protect them and to prevent them from becoming aberrations, the Lifebinder travels north with Thrall to join forces with the new aspect of magic. There, before long, the red, blue, and green dragonflights are reunited with their respective aspects, and with their might combined, they're going to kick some ass now. They're going to go leave to do battle with Chromatus and all of his creepy purple dragons. And after a vicious, long, hard-earned battle, they don't win. Chromatus is actually completely powerful and beats them back, kicks their ass, and overpowers all 3 mighty dragon aspects. The downhill battle, the losing battle against Chromatus is of course turned around with the arrival of Nozdormu and his bronze dragons. Nozdormu puts forward the notion that they will need to actually work together, but really work together. Not 4, all 5 of them. You need 5 dragon aspects for this, but there's no black dragons present, so Thrall, as a shaman, says, I guess I can do it, I guess. And so in their humanoid forms, alongside Thrall, the dragon aspects perform a ritual to combine their powers, and although Thrall struggles, he does succeed in his role in Neltharion's stead. The 4 dragon aspects and Thrall launch a volley of powerful abilities at the stunned Chromatus, who cannot bring himself to counter the volatile new powers at their disposal. The chromatic dragon is blasted downwards along with the leader of the Twilight cultists, the Twilight Father, a mysterious figure who we will learn of later. Chromatus's lifeless, or inert form, I should say, is stated in a specifically made arcane prison by the Blue Dragonflight, as it seems impossible to completely eradicate him. For some reason, he is not completely destroyable, and so they can only imprison him by a blue dragon forged arcane prison. Definitely means that's just code for this is going to be a really cool boss in the future if we never need to bring back the Twilight Dragons. Later on, the Aspects and Thrall meet on top of the Wormrest Temple, where Nozdormu informs the group of a plot by the old gods to destroy the Dragonflights. The hour of Twilight was fast approaching, and the Dragonflights, thanks to Thrall's help, will now be ready to face it. Thrall is given both thanks and a scale from each of the Dragon Aspects, and all he wants in return is a way back to the Maelstrom. He's returned to Agra's side, and the two work out the disagreement they had at the beginning of the story, and Thrall acknowledges that his entire life has been led and directed by outside influences, and he resolves to fix that. He resolves to change that. Knowing that greater challenges and greater trials await him in the future, Thrall sheds off one last thing, and that is his name Thrall, and fully embraces the name Goel. Thrall's storyline, or Goel's storyline, returns with Agra and him at the Maelstrom, and he still finds his connection after all that a little bit iffy, and he's just having trouble with that connection. He can't seem to get a hold of any of the elements. It's just not working. The world is broken, and he can feel that, and he wants to know how to fix it, but he just can't make that connection. And as I said before, in a different Lost Codex Legends episode, the one who does answer the really broken Discord call is the one he does not want to talk to, and that is Ragnaros the Firelord. Ragnaros shows him a vision of the World Tree Nordersil burning and Orgrimmar being destroyed, and mocks him as the hour of twilight burns everything around him. Thrall then travels to Mount Hyjal with Agra, aware that the most immediate threat is there. The Druids of Mount Hyjal and their allies eventually beat the initial invasion of Ragnaros and the Twilight's Hammer, and they set to work to undo the damage and make Mount Hyjal vibrant and beautiful, and empowering the World Tree together with the Aspects and Thrall. This event unfortunately ends in tragedy as the Twilight's Hammer strikes out against Thrall and ambushes him. Led by an incredibly powerful Twilight's agent, later revealed to be Fandral Staghelm, Thrall was struck down by dark magic, and his shamanistic powers were used against him. Everything that he was, his raw essence, was ripped apart and thrown into 4 separate corners of the elemental planes. Staghelm reveals that someone known as the Twilight's Prophet has deemed Thrall as the final obstacle in their plans, and thus stepped up to remove Thrall from the picture and to cast each of his essences, his torn apart spirit, into 4 separate, far corners of the elemental plane. Many, including the Aspects, assume Thrall is dead. This was dark, powerful magic, and he's a complete write-off. He's gone. Sorry, Thrall. But Agra thinks that Thrall can be saved. Agra's stubborn, and Agra is going to save him with the help of the Horden Alliance. And so we dive into the elemental planes to save each of Thrall's spirit. Thrall's self-doubt has manifested in the elemental plane of wind, where he expresses his doubt and his sorrow for pronouncing Garrosh as war chief, noting that he thinks Garrosh will lead the Horde to ruin. He mentions that he has failed both the Horde and the Earthen Ring, and that he is unworthy of Agra. In the elemental plane of water, Thrall's desires are shown to the player, where he is seen laying down his weapon before Varian Rin and making peace with his enemies. It also shows him that he desires to shrug off the responsibility of leadership with the Horde, and that he wants to start a family with Agra. This is all shown in the elemental plane of water. In the elemental plane of earth, Thrall's patience is made clear to us, where he is frozen in stone to symbolize his patience and absolute resolve. It is Thrall's raw, unhinged emotion that is shown in the elemental plane of fire and various other elemental planes. Here, his hatred towards Gul'dan and the murder of his parents is expressed. His hatred towards Varian for declaring war on the Horde, his hatred towards Blackmoor for the act of forcibly enslaving another, and the murder of Taretha Foxton, one of Thrall's earliest friends, and even Thrall's hatred towards Garrosh for his role in Cairn's demise can be seen. Everything that led to Cairn's death, Thrall is just raw and unhinged in this moment. Ultimately, Thrall's essences are returned together with the help of Agra and the player character, and Thrall is returned to the mortal plane. There he stands before Agra as Goel, son of Durotan. It's after this quest line that they return to the World Tree of Nordrassil, where this whole quest started, and Goel, son of Durotan, declares his love for Agra, and the two become life mates. Now after this, the Cataclysm's final epic conclusion starts to happen. As Thrall debates with the dragon aspects on how to defeat Deathwing, he communes with the earth and takes on an earthen form. It's at this moment where he encounters Deathwing, who uses the power of the old gods to imprison his spirit. Deathwing mocks Thrall, believing that the dragon aspects want to replace him as Earthwarder with this mere mortal shaman. He says that the gift that the Titan Keepers and the Titans bestowed upon him, the charge of protecting Azeroth, is in fact, or was in fact, a curse. To demonstrate this, Deathwing then allows Thrall to experience what it was like to feel the weight of the earth on his shoulders, to live a life of eternal torment. At this point, Deathwing unleashes a series of scathing attacks on Thrall's earthen form, and because Thrall had embraced Azeroth in spirit, and because Azeroth had embraced Thrall, the wounds and the damage inflicted upon Thrall are actually felt as real-life, real-time earthquakes. The Earthen Ring and the Cenarian Circle managed to break Deathwing's hold and bring Thrall back to his mortal body. The aspects then decide that in order for Deathwing to truly be defeated, they would have to acquire the Dragon Soul in its purest form, which is not long after it's created, many thousands of years prior, before the War of the Ancients, or during the War of the Ancients. This is a little bit troubling, but Nozdormu realizes that he is meant to guard the timelines, not meddle with it, but they need this artifact. Destroying Deathwing, stopping Deathwing is much more important, and Nozdormu notes that although this will have some hiccups in the time waves, once they're done with it, he will return the Dragon Soul back to time and hopefully fix things in small damages that are worth it in the long run, according to Nozdormu. As the Dragon Soul was imbued with a powerful enchantment to prevent dragonkind from ever using it, as was Deathwing's original plan when he created it, the aspects called on Thrall to be the wielder of the Dragon Soul in the battle against Deathwing. With the plan set, Thrall and the players are tasked with getting their hands on the Dragon Soul, which will be used to take down Deathwing. This involves going back in time to the War of the Ancients to get the Dragon Soul in its purest form. We are then sent to the future to see the alternate future of Azeroth, where Deathwing does win and the Hour of Twilight is brought down upon the world. Deathwing is seen impaled on Wormrest Temple, and we're forced to fight the alternate dark version of Nozdormu. Time stuff happens, everything's weird. It ends with Thrall and the player and the Dragon Soul making their way towards Wormrest Temple. Across the fields of Dragonblight, there's old god minions everywhere. It's a big battle. As Thrall goes, he fights some opponents. There's an Ice Ascendant and some Blood Elf Assassin who tries to kill him. Ultimately, we keep going, we win. As Thrall and the player characters make their way to Wormrest Temple, the Twilight's Prophet appears and reveals himself as the Archbishop Benedictus himself, the former Archbishop of the Light, of the Alliance. Apparently he joined the Twilight's Hammer cult because they've got really great benefits, evidently. And he attacks and ultimately falls before the party of heroes, and so Thrall leaves to make preparations for the big final battle. With the Dragon Soul in hand, Thrall and the Dragon Aspects prepare to defeat Deathwing once and for all, while the United Dragonflights fly around and attack all the Twilight cultists, and a band of mortal heroes, that would be the Raid, fend off attacks from all sides. Atop Wormrest Temple, after Alliance and Horde have successfully taken out Twilight agents and Old God generals and a big ugly Twilight dragon named Altraxian, Thrall goes full Super Saiyan and unleashes a blast of Dragon Soul juice at Deathwing, and it penetrates right through his armor, right through his hide, and scares the crap out of Deathwing. Deathwing then attempts to escape, attempts to do the whole villain, I'll get you next time, and flies off into the horizon. But we're not going to let that happen because we got airships and we're going to chase after him. And so begins the Deathwing chase. As the chase continues against Deathwing, Twilight Dragons attack and get in our way, but ultimately we catch up with the Dragon Aspect and we need to remove some of his plating. Thrall got really lucky on his first shot. Apparently he just had perfect sniping skills, but suddenly he has the aim of a stormtrooper and requires a little bit of a bigger target. Fine, understandable. And so we heroically jump over the edge of the ship and parachute onto Deathwing's back and forcefully rip off some of his armor plating, giving a big old bullseye for Thrall to once again use the Dragon Soul. Thrall does use the Dragon Soul, hits Deathwing right on target, and Deathwing falls miraculously, beautifully, right in the middle of the Maelstrom. Just the timing is impeccable. Well done, Thrall. Like, that's almost cinematic in lineup. Like, you couldn't have landed in a better spot. It's almost like it's set up for a boss encounter. And thus, Deathwing dies and falls into the Maelstrom. Nope, that's a lie. That's not where Deathwing dies. As Thrall and the Dragon Aspects begin to celebrate and cheer, they hear a terrible sound coming from the Maelstrom, and out of the swirling vortex rises a writhing, terribly mutated form of the former Earthwarder Neltharion. Deathwing is now this massive, molten behemoth of just unfathomable power. He is mad, he is falling apart. Literally, the energies that the old gods had infused in him is causing him to physically melt and warp. The plates that are on him are no longer there, and he is just a mess, conveniently sitting in the middle of the Maelstrom. Thrall rolls his eyes and says, "Oh god, I gotta do this again," and powers up the Dragon Soul as we heroes, alongside the Dragon Aspects, basically distract Deathwing and keep him away from Thrall. Thrall takes one final shot at Deathwing, blows him up into a million pieces. A piece of his jaw lands really close to us, almost kills us, so that could have been terrifying. And everything's over. Deathwing's dead. We're all rejoicing. We're all looting the chest. Transmog was just introduced into that patch, so Thrall is really eager for some upgrades, but he's going to go back to his old shaman robes because he really likes that classic look, I guess. In this moment, with Deathwing dead and the Cataclysm over, Thrall feels the elements awakening. Thrall can feel the torment of the elements waning as they are emerging from the wake of the Cataclysm. Alexstrasza explains to Thrall,
"We Dragon Aspects have fulfilled our great purpose, and our ancient power is expended.
And the Age of Mortals has come. The Age of Mortals has arrived, for they, the Dragon Aspects, have fulfilled their duties." It's also here where Alexstrasza reveals that Agra is pregnant, much to Thrall and Agra's delight. Thrall's going to be a dad, and he is super excited. And with that, we are done with Thrall Part 3. Who is Thrall, the World Shaman? He did a lot in Cataclysm, so he needed his own single video for this patch, for this expansion rather, so we will be back to talk about what he does after Cataclysm and the expansions following for Part 4 later on, so stay tuned for that. As always, a special huge shout out to Laytis and Shandryn for your awesome hard work on the videos and gathering all the facts and putting together that massive roller coaster of a journey for Thrall and Twilight of the Aspects and Rage of the Firelands and all that. Kudos to you guys. Thank you guys for making this video a reality. And thank you to everyone who left comments on the last video regarding what kind of characters you'd like to see for the future of Lost Codex Legends. We're definitely making a list of both minor characters, classic characters, and obviously the big name characters who will have multiple parters. We don't want to focus too much on the main characters. Every week we want to make sure we have a nice alternating series of characters, a cast of characters to keep things interesting for people who you are aware of, and then for people who you maybe have no idea who they are. So stay tuned for that. We have a lot of fun characters planned. So just hang on. We're going to get to your favorite characters as soon as we can. And one final thank you to our patrons over at patreon.com/lostcodex, for without them, these videos wouldn't be possible. They give their real life money, their real life support to make this channel a reality. So thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. No matter if you're the Initiate tier or the Tech Scholar tier on Patreon, your support means the world to us. Everyone's support, everyone who watches our videos, who leaves a comment, who leaves a thumbs up, all of your support means the world to us. But the patrons over at patreon.com deserve a little extra thank you. So thank you guys so much. If you would like to support the channel and see what we offer on Patreon, please check out the link in the description below. And with that, that's all I have. That's all I got to offer for today. Who is Thrall, the World Shaman, Part 3? Let me know what you guys thought of this video, and let me know, specifically tied to Thrall's role as a shaman, do you think Thrall's involvement with the aspects as a replacement Earthwarder is going to come up in the story again? Or is Thrall's World Shaman days over? Is that plotline long and over? Obviously, he's still a shaman, but what do you guys think? Is what happened during Cataclysm, is that going to potentially come up again, involving his role as the Earthwarder in future storylines? Or do you think that that is just locked to Cataclysm? Let me know what you guys think in the description below. And if you didn't answer last week's question on which characters you'd like to see, we'll answer it in this one. What characters do you want to see in Lost Codex Legends? Main character, small character? Who is, what is this weapon? Who is this organization? It can be organizations, it could be groups, it could be clubs, weapons, people. Who is everything? Who is World of Warcraft? And it'll be a 12-hour documentary by Jesse. That won't ever happen. But it might, it won't. I'm telling you right now, it won't. But just let me know who you want me to talk about, and we'll make it happen. We'll try to make it happen. No promises. And that's all I got. So answer the question and give the video a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you want. And I'll be back later this week with another episode of Lost Codex Legends. Until then, see ya.